right, perfect. So very, very excited to be talking to you today. Thanks for making the time. I know it's crazy busy. So can we start? You have a practice quiz on your Instagram profile. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do, and then why, like, sort of that Instagram link is such a powerful piece of real estate, like why you start with a practice quiz when you're engaging new clients?
Yeah, so I'm a clinical psychologist, and then I also do coaching for therapists to like brand and build a private practice. So initially I had private practice to screen consultations for new clients. That way, because a lot of times they call into the number and I'm not in the position to answer, or I'm not ready to do a consultation. So I'd rather them fill out that form first, whether it's a therapy or coaching client, and then I can screen them prior to us getting on the call, because that helps me also determine like what we should be talking about on that call. And it helps me route them to the right service, because some people may call me for one service and they actually need another one, or I'm not a good match.
Got it. And so you both serve patients who are working with you directly and people who are therapists who are building their own business.
Right.
I love that. What came first?
Therapy. The coaching came on accident. So yeah, I went to school for therapy, of course, but then I used to work for Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health. Okay. So I ended up leaving due to burnout. And a lot of the therapists just start calling me saying, how did you make it out? I used to work in the jail, so I thought that was funny. Like, how did you make it out?
Yeah.
You know, and so
talk to us a bit about that. Okay, all right. All right. We're just moving out.
So. Yeah, I've lived in LA. That's hectic. That's a hectic job you had there. You seem very well adjusted considering.
Well, it's crazy because after I worked there and then I went somewhere else, I was working with the juvenile justice system. So I was still, and I still am, I'll be honest, to some degree, still institutionalized, meaning I'm very comfortable in a box, which is not the best thing. But it is what it is.
Can you, like, this is not a typical career path, just from where you began to where you are. Can you talk to us a little bit about what your journey has been?
Yeah, so I grew up in Compton, California. I went K through 12 pretty much out here. And then I went to Cal State Dominguez Hills for the undergrad and master's. Then I decided to go up north to a school, a psychology professional school. Did that the program was 4 years. And then I first came back to LA to do an internship for LA County for the adults who came out of the facilities. And then when I graduated, the market crashed. And so that was not ideal. I'm like, I always tell people, like, imagine having a 6-figure good debt, I guess, but you can't find a job and you still have to get licensed. So you have to get hours. So none of that is happening when you can't get hired. And my lease is about to expire. My health benefits got cut off. So it was like a mess. And that's when I started to recognize, like, oh, you know, jobs are not dependable. And so I ended up moving back up north, got my hours, got licensed, came back and worked for the county for the jail system for about 4.5 years. I worked there twice. I only lasted the second time for like 43 days. And I'm glad that I went back, because that saved me from having to not tap into my true business ownership mindset later on in life, because some people wait later to figure that out. And I figured it out around 30. And so 30-ish, yeah. And so from there, like I mentioned, I was doing great work in the community, and then building a private practice just came natural, because I've always liked to create stuff, and I like to create forms and stuff like that. So PocketSuite was like super easy for me, like, oh, okay, cool, you know. And then some of my interns that I would have, I've used PocketSuite for. At one point when I was starting to hire the interns, I would use it for certain payments. We tried that. We did it they were using it to do intakes with their clients so that we can share the material, and it was easier than paper charts, of course, because we were still new to electronic charting. And it was easy to communicate via text in a group. And then I've also used PocketSuite like therapy blended in coaching. I did a lot of stuff with what is it called? Transitional age youth kids, like 16 to 24. So up until last year, I was doing this 3 to 4 times a year at my office. We would have a weekend, or I would do it, but we would schedule these kids to come in for like 1 or 2 days and do like a living skills crash course because they didn't get that in high school anymore. And I would book them through the PocketSuite app where their parents would either pay or sign a contract. And so it's kind of where I started, where I'm at now, and then getting bigger.
I'm overwhelmed by just, and so impressed. When you said with working with the juvenile justice system, when you talked about the jail, like I just had a moment, like a heart palpitation, because for me and I think for most people, it's like, that is just heavy. It's just heavy. Mm-hmm. How do you carry that? And what is the experience of providing that kind of counseling support, being a helper to that population?
Yeah, because I still help the population now. So when I first started, I was working, before I actually became a therapist, I was still in training. So I decided to work at group homes first. And that's when I recognized how heavy it truly was, because a lot of their problems were coming home with me. And at the time, I didn't recognize it. I just thought I was a loving, caring person. But the person I lived with, they were like, oh my God. And so then when I went to grad school, I am assertive. So I asked my professor, like, how do we separate it, because now I'm in high schools and I have kids that I always worked in the more impoverished neighborhoods. So up north, I worked in North Richmond, Central Richmond, and East Oakland. And so some of those kids were foster kids. And I remember having my first foster kid asking me after 3 weeks, like, can you be my mom? And I'm like, shoot. But then in my heart, I'm like, I do want to take you home because her situation sucked, because in therapy, you get to know all the skeletons. And so, so my supervisor had gave me like a quick little tip, and I just had to practice it, to be honest. And I think it takes a desire to want to do this, because some people want to overdo it and then burn themselves out. So what she told me, she had a symbolic gesture in her office. She had one of those silver bowls that you like stir up like cake batter or whatever. And she said, when I leave work, excuse my language, she was like, I leave the shit here. And so I physically or mentally have to do that, because if I go home and I take this to my husband and my kids, it's not going to be very helpful and healthy. And so I just practiced that over time. And then when I started working in the jail, it became more difficult because it's a different group of kids. But I think what helped for that is support and community. I had a girl who I carpooled with. She lived in downtown LA. I lived in Compton at the time. And so we would have a 2-hour drive. I worked in Lancaster and lived in Compton. So it's a 2-hour drive. So we had time to decompress. And then now what I do, which is a lot easier, is I think it's different working with adults than kids, because kids to me attach a lot quicker. So now I work in a nonprofit, or I'll collaborate with them. I don't work for them, but I collaborate with them to do trauma-informed care. So I go in there and I do workshops, but there's no therapy, so they can't open up that much to me, which is, I'd rather just refer them.
It's a group therapy.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I find out their stories because they do share, even though they say they're not, they share once 5 minutes in, but it doesn't go that deep.
So I have a question. I don't buy that anyone can just do this job. Like I read a lot of I read a lot of Gavin DeBecker. You know who Gavin DeBecker?
I've heard of him before, yeah.
Right. And he wrote this book called The Gift of Fear, but he wrote one about protecting your kids called Protecting the Gift, and it goes really deep. And I got 3 little girls, and it's really heavy, even to read, right? Where you don't live it. Mm-hmm. So, we're looking at different people thinking of pivoting, going into different jobs, wondering if this is right for them. What kind of personality and what sort of resilience and inner strength do you need just even to approach this job?
So I know for one that most grad schools actually make mandatory now is that they make the therapist sit on the other side of the couch to see what it's like to even be in therapy. And now the students can actually get hours. But I think that that's very important because I talk about baggage a lot, and I feel like everybody has a story that actually helps me do my job well. Is that I believe that no matter where I see these kids, whether it's jail, whether you did something bad, whether it's just a regular person that needs help, everybody has a story. And what I did in my practice that's a little different than my colleagues is that I use grad school to evaluate myself. Technically, that was a given because all of our papers were written about our family. We had to do research on ourselves. But I took it seriously because I saw a lot of skeletons that I needed to clear. And, I had to evaluate me being an adolescent and what that was like. And I had a father that was incarcerated my entire life. And so I never linked the two, even though other people would try to do it for me. Like, that's why you do it. And I'm like, no, I just really love my whole give back when I was a kid was I just want to give back to Compton. That was always my MO, and I don't understand why. And my dad ain't even from Compton. And so once the year I was applying for internship when I was graduating, I have siblings on his side. I only know one of them. And she decided to have a heart-to-heart with me. I don't even know how it came up. And she had shared his true history, like the part that no one will talk about. And it was a lot of trauma. And that's when I started to recognize, like, damn, everybody do got a story. And this is why he has a lack of certain things as a man, as a father, as potentially, somebody partner. But I believe everybody has a story. And I believe on my side as a therapist, if you can't see that everybody has a story, and if you're quick to judge and act on your judgment, then that's a problem. Because all of us judge. Like, if somebody tells me they don't judge, I'm like, you lying. But because I'm a professor, so I tell my students, like, if you tell me you don't judge, we got a problem. But if you can walk in the room, understanding your judgments, being real with yourself, knowing if a client is not a good match because they might be held triggering you and your baggage that you did not clear in therapy or whatever, you need to either get out of this field or find another a way to deal with your stuff. Or thirdly, this is something a professor told me, is that you need to know your trigger points. So she had shared with us early on, when she started having children, she stopped working with children because she could not take off her mother hat. And so I guess the bigger word we're looking for is that somebody has to be super insightful to, like, what's happening with them, what's happened to them, in order to determine who they should be working with and what are their limitations. But not everybody wants to do that, though, because that's looking in the mirror.
Right. One step further, I mean, with DeBecker, he came from a tragic home life, but that's where he got his ability for risk assessment and mitigating risk and seeing things coming and descaling things, et cetera. And you said, I mean, you have a backstory, I have a backstory. Do you think that's helpful? Does that actually help in your vocation, or could it be a trigger point, or could it go either way, I guess?
It could go either way, but I'm a very big component of what is your approach. Because I've had, like, working in Richmond, predominantly the kids are Black and brown. And so I remember in particular from Planned Parenthood, there was a Caucasian younger lady. She was super cool, super laid back. But one day I brought a Black boy to her to do some Planned Parenthood type thing. He wanted me to sit there with him. I'm like, that's not appropriate, but whatever. And so I sat there with him, and she started to act different. And she started to use slang terminology that she grew up with me in the 90s. So I'm like, why are you using that word? You don't even know what that word means, like, in my head. So I had to have a conversation with her, what she had told me, but she's not a therapist, but still it applies because she serves this population. And she said that I felt nervous. And because he didn't say nothing, he was just looking and observing, she felt on edge, and then she started to switch. And that's what I see as a difference culturally, a cultural component or not, is the approach. But does our background help? Yes. And I use mine to my advantage with certain groups of people. So with the reentry program I work with now, every time I do my introduction, you better believe I say I grew up in Compton, California, because these are men and women who are from the hood. And my whole topic is on trauma. And so I twist it and I talk about PTSD in the hood. And then I give them my examples of what I've been exposed to. And that helps them resonate with what I've been through, so that they can open up more. So it does help, but it is your approach too.
That's fascinating. Thanks for sharing.
Let's do this. So two questions. I could talk to you all day. So let's just be clear about that. Who's your client?
Mm-hmm.
Who pays you? And sort of and how do you define a win for your client versus your patient? Because I hear the kind of cake batter mix. And so what's a win there? Is it?
Yeah, it's defined in multiple groups. So I'll say with difficult adolescents versus a regular adult. Difficult adolescents, I don't work with too many adolescents as much because that was my private practice initially from the jail. And then I started working with their parents because their parents were truly the identified patients, not the kid. It was about 20% the kid. And I actually did more work with the family. And so if I were to choose to work with transitional age youth again, I would prefer my ideal client as an adolescent, male or female. Doesn't matter color, I've worked with them all. And I would just want them to be open and receptive to learning something new, because I think that the lovely part about kids or teenagers is that even though they may be hard on the outside, they're super soft on the inside. You just got to have the right approach, you know? And also a big component is the family has to be willing to make changes and shifts as well. And so when I look at progress, I define progress very realistically, but that's not what I did initially. I had high expectations, and I would be sad, which is probably why I took a lot of my work home with me, because I was like,
that's why everyone feels it's so heavy, right? Because you set these high bars, and it's just.
No, when I started working in the jail, that's when I really recognized that my bar was too high. And so what I would do, like some of those kids, they would earn their GEDs while they were in high school. I mean, when they were in jail. And so I asked probation one day, just to kind of create a different atmosphere, is I said, can we celebrate the kids who got the GED or high school diploma? And they were like, what do you want to do? I'm like, I don't know, give them a certificate or something. So they were like, I don't want to do it. So I made the certificate, but I said, hey, like, I don't mind buying them in and out if y'all approve it, because they get county food. So for a while they approved it, and then it got so big where I created a whole shrine on the wall, to the point where I think at one point we had maybe 25 to 30 GED or graduation certificates saying congratulations. And so all the new kids that would come into jail that were short of credits but not motivated, they wanted to go on the wall and they wanted an In-N-Out burger, and so we started that with the kids. But again, that's redefining something small versus a big one would be, I want you to go home and not come back. Okay, let's be realistic. 70% of y'all coming back. So that's the statistics. So let's not play that game. For an adult, and also for my coaching clients, I can lump them in one. I mainly help them identify, to me, what do they want their outcome to be. So it's kind of like the miracle question. What would your life look like if you were functioning healthy on a mental health level? Because you're not going to be perfect. So like at a 70%, what would your life look like? And then for someone in business, I have this on one of my questionnaires online, like, what do you want your business to look like 1 year from now? What do you want your time to look like? What do you want your lifestyle to look like? And based off of what they tell me, now they've opened up a door for me to do whatever I want to help them with that goal, but I have their buy-in. So I go from I go backward.
Yeah. Well, so if I turn that question on you, what would you like your business to look like a year from now? What would you like?
I got my 10-year business plan. I did it like a couple months ago. So, but like I'm in the 2-part, like on mental health, I really want to do a membership program. Because I have a membership program for therapist coaching clients, but I want one for therapy clients, because one, not everyone can afford mental health. Mental health is an investment, not an expense, but not everybody has the funds. The healthcare center insurance is broken, the system. If you don't have a diagnosis, you can't get therapy under your insurance. It sucks, so I want to be able to offer a membership where I can still drop the tools, kind of like a self-help book, but I'm in there doing videos, and it's like $22 a month. So the cost of a copay can get you 4 weeks of content, kind of thing. And then my coaching, I really want to touch the lives within 10 years of 10,000 clinicians, but I want it to come from, I have a podcast, so I want it to be either through free content, and then like just going up my marketing plan, being able to touch as many as I can to help them see that my business is called Branding for Abundance. So I want to brand like their mindset, their business, and their lifestyle, like for abundance. Like, you shouldn't live in a box.
Wow. And the people that you train, are they primarily in the same specialization as you, or are they so they're across the board? Wow.
Yeah, they're across the board. I have people in different states. Mostly I have more people on the East Coast, which is interesting, like in the DMV, New York area. But they're across the board with specialization. And then I have a small group of students who still join my coaching programs, because I always teach them that it's never too early to start branding, especially right now.
It's funny because when people talk about the work that independent professionals do, they talk about it as a one-to-one exercise. But the way you're talking about your business, it's a one-to-many. You're a multiplier, right? Like, I don't know if you've read the book Multipliers, but
yeah.
You're people, right? Just get to the next level and then multiply outward. It's just that's pretty amazing. So, all right. So fun question for you. What do you do in your spare time?
Well, right now, I'm just kidding.
Like what spare time, right?
Right. That. But What I do now, I mean, some of it is still personal development, some of it is all for fun. So if we're not in this situation, I like to travel. I like to expose. I have a 2-year-old son and a 9-year-old son. We have a blended family. So we like as much as possible to help them see anything beyond the 4 corridors that they live in. We like to do, city-like activities. I do meditation. I do things at my church, which right now it's all online. Like going to amusement parks. I like playing sports. I like exercising. I like staying active.
Yeah.
I actually have a hard time sitting still. So
that must be interesting in sessions, right?
Yeah, I'll start moving. Like I schedule my sessions on purpose, like 45 minutes where I have a break and I'll go upstairs just to walk around or go outside. Cause that's what I meant by institutionalization. I was indoors with no windows all day for 10 hours.
Wow.
I'm happy to get freedom.
Yeah. So I have a question for you, and I have very little experience. I know very little about Compton. I've been there a couple of times. I know Nipsey Hussle story, etc. But I have a feeling. I mean, I used to go to Homeboy Industries in LA, and I used to. Yeah, of course. I was the East Side. I was like Alhambra, El Monte, that kind of thing. And a lot of these dudes they're good people, but they're really hard. They're really hard, and getting through to them and breaking down this stigma about talking about your problems, about talking about your hurts, about talking about mental illness and that kind of thing. Like, how do you get through to the people that really need the help? Because a lot of these dudes that I met have been told to put up walls, like no weakness, and don't show vulnerabilities. Like, how do you get to them?
Yeah. So as an earlier reference, how I said I do the PTSD in the Hood series. So I started doing that about 4 years ago when I was still working somewhere in the juvenile justice system, or probably a little bit after. But I did it on Facebook Live one day, and that was my first time getting over like 1,000 views. And I was like, oh, I didn't know it was like that popular. And what I did back then is I would share like what it was like growing up in Compton, certain things that I saw that I wouldn't deem as traumatic, but because it was my norm. But when I started talking about it in front of my peers, it clearly was abnormal. They were like, bro, you're crazy, but I would laugh about it. And so I started sharing it on Facebook, and then that turned into what I'm doing now in the nonprofit. So like, to answer your question, a lot of these gentlemen are from all parts of South Central and East LA, Black and brown mostly, and some women, but mostly men, just got released from the jail or penitentiary around California. And the way that I get through them beyond helping them resonate with just my life story is telling them the benefits and pros of mental health. So basically breaking down the stereotypes of mental health. And I remember specifically like 3 weeks ago, I had a younger gentleman, 21-ish. And he said, as soon as I came in, he was like, I don't like no mental health. I said, well, this ain't therapy. Like I'm just providing you with information. And it's fascinating because as many times as he said he don't like mental health, he had the most damn questions, and so that to me, I watch your nonverbals over anything, because the fact that you're asking more questions, the fact that I'm reading traumatic, a questionnaire and you sign, you've already identified that there is a problem. And what's fascinating about the one that I do versus the traditional trauma inventory is I found a casual one in which I can break down and give examples to them. And then I'll tell them there is no magical number, because they're like, what do my score mean? Because they just tally them up like dominoes. And I just tell them whether you got 1 tally or 50. If you got a tally, you probably need to go talk to somebody, because odds are that's impacting or impairing your ability to even be a well-balanced parent. Because one of the examples I always cap them off with is, who's a parent? They'll raise their hand. And I'll give them one of the symptoms, that's hypervigilance. Hypervigilant parents become overprotective because you've had trauma, something happened to you as a child, or where you worked at, like probation officers have this too. And now all of a sudden you want to be super overprotective of your child, not recognizing that's a damn problem. That's not a strength, that's a problem. So it's fascinating because I have the evaluation forms when I specifically meet with these gentlemen, and about 7 out of 10, every time we have a group each week, most of them will say F mental health. And when I'm done after an hour, they all check off, yes, I need mental health.
Yeah. Well, so,
so I'm like, boom.
So you've got me going now. So I feel really strongly that most of us have at least one person in our family that has, clear, we all have mental health, we're all in the spectrum, but one person in our family that's really struggling. I know I do. And I feel like there's so much family trauma as a result of that dynamic. And there's a part of me that says, you have an entire business in these quizzes, right? Because I think part of it is just the awareness around, oh, can I give it a name? And so then can we lean into it and figure out how we, sort of work through it and nurture it? Have you thought about just a whole set of quizzes that people can take, families, individuals and families that want to be part of the solution, but don't know how, and just keep repeating the same challenges over and over again? I really think the PocketSuite community would benefit from it. And I know individuals, a huge business there.
No, I'm always open for creativity.
No, seriously, if you'd be willing to share a few quizzes, we'll share it with the PocketSuite community and get the word out, because this is just, this is real.
Okay.
How about one more question? Sorry. There's been so much cultural appropriation from Compton, right? Like I grew up with NWA, and I talked about Nipsey Hussle and Childish Gambino. And unfortunately, a lot of the connotation is negative. But as somebody who's from Compton, can you tell the world like some of the positives, some of the art, the music, the culture that comes out of Compton, instead of just people dwelling on like, oh, Compton, that's the place I see in all the gangster movies that,
Yeah. Well, well, that's actually a lot of the questions that I get when I do a presentation in front of professionals. As soon as I say Compton, they're like, oh my God, you're like a gang member. Like I've had people tell me that. And so I'm like, no, like, psychoeducation is that every single city has a good part and bad part, period. Living in those cities, and you become resilient to what's happening, where to go and how to protect yourself. At the same time, I also believe that if you go deeper than what's shined on the internet or on a movie or on a video, you got to remember why they amp those things up. They have to get ratings. And so if you actually get to know some of these people, they're literally, some of them are, I ain't gonna say no names, but one of them was completely opposite of who that man is now, with the tats on his face, and he's from Compton. You know what I'm saying? We went to high school together. I was spending out over his house with his sister. Like,
are you talking about The Game?
Yes.
Big fan.
But he's good people, but I know that
Smart.
he has a second lifestyle, because at that point he left Compton High, because that's where we all went. So I think that's where that other stuff comes from, whatever. But still, when you go see this person, if we all had like a city basketball game, like they give back to the community, they care about the kids. I remember last year, one girl who mom works for the school district, she inboxed me on Instagram and she said, hey, can my mom add you to the wall at the school for these kids? And I'm like, what wall? She said, Kendrick Lamar on there, the game is on there. Like, we're just trying to showcase to these kids that despite how they see these people with like money and cars, they have a bigger purpose, but we also want to show them a diverse group of people that came from Compton, and also that we made it out. And when we say we made it out of the hood, it does not necessarily mean physically, because my whole family still stays there. I just moved from Compton in November just because I have two sons and I just know where I stayed. And I'm like, no, but at the end of the day, my heart is still there, but that doesn't mean my mentality has to be there. And I think that that's where a lot of people get lost, is that they just see Compton for a name. And Compton has a lot of pride and a lot of good people there, but you got to get to know the people there to figure that out.
Right. Strong people.
Yeah. Super. Yeah. If you ever went to like a because we're the biggest high school in Compton High, the alumni association is ridiculous. Like giving back to the kids to the point where this is how big our homecoming is. Like on homecoming week, just like every school, they have like daily activities, but on homecoming day, they do the whole tailgate party. You would think USC and UCLA is playing or something in the lobby, because they get all the alumni going back to like the freaking 50s, 60s, like it's serious. And then we go into the classroom to talk to the kids about school pride. We have a parade for them and showcase certain people that came out of Compton that a lot of kids are very surprised because people don't say it. So they showcase those people and let them talk to the kids. And then, of course, we do a big old thing for the kids, like during the homecoming game, and the alumni come back and we perform. Like and we have two sides now. Like alumni, they now cook and get down and dance, and we got a DJ, and then we're watching through the gate the actual game, but we ain't paying attention because we having too much fun over here. It's like more fun as an alumni now. But those are the things
we gotta go. We gotta check that out.
Those things are not captured though, and those are the things that I feel like need to be captured. Like,
so I gotta harp on this. So Dr. Tekesia, there are a ton of people who would want to follow your footsteps and do what you do that don't realize that this is a career path, that they can make really great money and live a really great life.
Mhm.
Can you share a little bit about what makes your life so sweet, just in terms of like the business you're running and the success that you've had? I know it's a little bit of a bragging, but I think it's important for us to popularize industries that are not as well known and specializations that are not as well understood.
Yeah. So one of the things I really, really love about psychology is that, one, I feel like I can literally work anywhere, meaning with different people in different institutions in the community from home. Like, I am an essential provider. And I don't think a lot of people understood how important we are, especially right now, and so I also like the diversity of being able to work with different groups of people, being able to, like, if I can more so say, like, the places that I have worked or that I currently like hold the titles, like I'm a college professor. Then I sit on the advisory council for the Boris L. Henson Foundation, the Taraji P. Henson Foundation, where we talk about breaking stereotypes of mental health. And then I can go and work in the jail. I can propose, that's how I got reentry program. I can go and be a program developer because I have the psychology. If you think about it and what people teach in marketing, I have the psychology behind sales. I have the psychology behind reading people. I have the psychology, and so to me, I am well versed. And also because I know how to engage with people, because of what I also teach my clients and what I teach my students, is I feel like I'm more personable and more approachable. And so what I would love to see that I don't think a lot of people talk about is like educating younger people of all different ethnic backgrounds of what kind of careers and what type of lifestyle they can also have by being a therapist. Because to be honest, like, I can get licensed in multiple states and I can literally, especially now, like, work from my computer. Like, I was literally in Vegas and they were like, oh, that's a nice background. I'm like, oh, I know, I just came to the Aria, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? They were like, when are you coming back? And I'm like, tomorrow. It was only a 3.5-hour drive. And they like, what the heck? Or that's how I get a lot of my coaching clients, is that they will see me travel because I invest in coaching myself and I travel with my coaches. Like, oh, that's where you're going to be. I'm being there too. But then what I'll do, just to like get very creative, I had a workshop in New York like last April. I had a coaching client that was in New York and we typically meet online. I emailed her the week of and I'm like, hey, what you doing on Thursday? She was like, oh, working at the school. I'm like, oh, can you come down to my office on Fifth Avenue? She was like, what you mean your office? I'm like, I got an office out there because we have a satellite, like, sister offices. So I just called up the person and we made an appointment. So I said, hey, I'm surprised you can get like a VIP day with me or whatever. So she took off work. She didn't care. She took off work. She came down Fifth Avenue, put on her tennis shoes, got on the subway, and she was sitting there with me for 4 hours. And she's from Brooklyn, or Queens, one of them. So, but it was like so dope. But it's just like so versatile. Like, it's ridiculous. And the amount of money or revenue that you can generate in your business, to me, is so unlimited, because how I teach my coaching clients, you can take one stream of income, like a private practice, like, and then have multiple legs. Like, so my private practice, I can work with couples and then sell my couples workbook and then have a couples workshop and then have a couples retreat. That's just one group of people. I ain't got to adolescents, family members, parenting, like, so membership programs.
And you could do this job for a long time.
I can do it. These are one of the jobs that you can do after retirement. There are a lot of therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists that work well beyond their years. But I mean, think about it. You get paid to sit down and help people and talk to people like that. If that ain't the funnest job ever, like,
And you probably have, you have wisdom. You gain wisdom as you go on, right? So
yeah, and I'm a lifetime learner, and that's one of the things I love about being a professor and a coach, because it makes me have to be on top of my game, because I'm teaching every year or every semester. And then if I'm coaching people, because I also do continuing educational credits for therapists that I just got into last year with my coaching clients. That's how I combined it. It's like a bonus. You get CEs. And but I always have to be on top of my game with ethics. So
You need to do a master's class. I don't know if you've heard of the whole master's class phenomenon where they're basically teaching the world about their specific specialization. It's online, people subscribe, and you just, you have so many, just the way you broke down how the multiple sort of streams of income just with each demographic you work with, I was like, that just makes so much sense. So another fun question. If you could pick one person, two people to have dinner with, dead or alive, who in history or right now, who would they be and why?
Well, I know deceased, of course, MJ. That was like my, idol, and we got the same last name. So definitely Michael. Right now, I would want to, that's a hard one. I got a lot. I would say Miss Obama, only because specifically, I feel like I saw her becoming like thing. Yeah. And I feel like I like the work that she was doing, of course, talking to all the girls and stuff, but I really liked how she had a different perspective of, I'm gonna say, helping run the world, but from a secondary perspective than just looking at like how much I have to hold with my clients, and heck, how much she had to hold with him and the whole world and kids and your mama. Like, that's a lot. Like, how did you balance that out and be a Black woman? And considering all the things that
she went through,
and I've been through similar on my level. Like, I would love to interview, like, talk, but interview. Give me some tips.
Yeah, when's your podcast and your book? When's that all coming out?
So my podcast has been out. It's on all of them. If you just like look up Dr. TK, yep. It should show up, and it'll say like Branding for Abundance, because my goal is to reach 100 episodes by December 31st. So we're
going to give you a shout out for sure.
So I have the podcast, and then one of the books that I have, it's right here. It's, I'll show it to you. It's like a small relationship book. And I actually wrote this book originally for premarital couples. And it's just like a couple of questions with like journal pages. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that more people that were already married or in a cohabitating relationship bought the book because they never did premarital counseling. And so, it covers basically all the topics that help you have mature conversations. And what's fascinating, since I have a male and female on the call, is that it's crazy. The men actually got more into the book. I think one of them said, I was just happy I didn't have to read. I'm like, what? And he was like, but they filled it out because it was like, just a couple of questions. And what happens is they have to fill out their answers to the questions per chapter assignment that we agree on or whatever, unless they buy it on Amazon. And then they have to come back together as a couple and talk about their responses, but they can't share their responses prior, because then when people talking, they change their answers. Yeah. And then if you're single, I did an update, because it used to be a wedding cake, like my wedding cake. Yeah. So it's for singles too. And I tell singles to get it, to kind of wrap their head around what kind of relationship they want, because these issues are still going to come up, whether you like it or not.
I watched the movie Marriage Story. I don't know if you saw that on Netflix. Yeah, and you should check it out. It's very much about these, sort of existential questions, right? About, husband and wife, and sort of these things these cycles, you just keep going through, these narratives that you keep, that you sort of hold on to about each other, that just enables you to, makes you stuck. So very, very interesting. I'm going to get that book. So Dr. Tekesia, just one final question is, what message do you have for the PocketSuite community? We've all been going through a lot, as I'm sure you've experienced that firsthand. What message do you have as folks look into the future as to what next, and how we can just keep navigating our way through all of this?
So I would say 3 things that I tended to tell myself and tell people I'm around is like, 1, protect your energy. So protect like what you allow to come in. I'm a real big advocate, since all this happened, is like, I may not have control over what's happening in the world, but I have full control over what's happening in this house, including my mind. And so you will not control this household, And so I have to make it as best as I can, which comes with time management, going online, looking up techniques, and also seeking out mental health if you need to talk to somebody, because a lot of people are isolating right now, and that's not healthy. So protect your energy is 1. The second one, it can be for personal or business, especially business, is like learn how to pivot one of the things that's been drilled into my head from all my business coaches is like, you know, when the market crashes, the world goes on sale. And I didn't even realize how big of a deal this was until I journaled it out and realized that I purchased my first home that I had sold for double the amount. I purchased it at the tail end of when I couldn't find no job. Like 3 years later, after I saved up money, I was able to purchase my first home, and it was for like super low, you know? And so I'm like, during this season, it's going to be around for a minute, and I want to be able to do it again. So, you know, don't allow this season to bring you down. You should be being very creative with all this time you have. Because at first we used to complain about not having any time, and now you got all the time. Exactly. And then the third one is very simple for those who are experiencing like anxiety or pain, is I always just say pain is temporary. And if you don't believe it, then I would advise you to sit down and think about a time that you didn't think you would make it through, but clearly you are, because you're thinking about this right now. And you probably didn't think you were going to make it through then, but here you are. So it's temporary.
It's temporary. This too shall pass.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time. We are going to get back to you about these quizzes, because we do want the community to get on that. We're going to transcribe this interview. We're going to give shout outs for you, your book, everything you're doing. So keep doing what you're doing. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.
Talking with you. Thank you.
You too. Bye.
Okay, have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.